First of all, I want to tell you that your mom, your dad, and you 4 grandchildren have been and are our greatest blessing, and have filled our lives with happiness and love. And we hope you will all be blessed as we have been. Thomas Jefferson said, quote, "I like the dream of the future better than the history of the past," unquote. Now I'll try, and whatever I have learned regarding the ONeill and Byrnes families, I'll report to you now. My grandmother and grandfather ONeill both were born in the old country. Grandma ONeill, her parents moved to Wales before she was born, but she would never admit it. She didn't want anybody to know that she was born in Wales, because the Welsh and the Irish were not very friendly. Grandpa ONeill was born in Ireland, and his father took him to Wales. So that's where they met in the first place when they were kids. Now, Grandma ONeill came over. Her father sent her over here because she had cousins in Boston. And then a few years later, Grandpa ONeill came over, and he didn't see her at the time, but Grandma ONeill found out where he was, and she wrote him a letter. He was then down in West Virginia working in a coal mine. He was 19 years old. So he went back up to Boston, and they were married, and they had 12 children, 6 boys and 6 girls, and you children have seen the picture of all of them. Now my mother and father. My mother was born in Rome, New York. My mother was born in Boston, and they moved to Rome right after her birth, and she was the last of the children who were born in Boston. The rest of the family were born in Rome, the younger brothers and sisters. My father was born in Rome, New York. His father was born in Caledonia, New York, Livingston County. His father was James Byrne. That would be your great-great-grandfather, my great-grandfather. And I don't know any more about it than that, except I do have some information that Joey Byrnes got out of the Rome Historical Society. And if you want to talk to Papa about his grandparents now.
My father and your great-grandfather was born in Ireland and came to Canada when he was approximately 15 years of age. And later on, he moved to Benson Mines in Harrisville, which is in Lewis County, New York, up in the Adirondacks. He had been married in Canada. He married Mary Nolan. They had 6 children, 4 of whom survived when he married my mother. And the oldest child was Alice. And then there was Joseph, James, George, Ann and Rose, Jim. When Mother married him, only George, Jim, Ann, and Rose were alive. The other children had died.
It was Joe who was alive.
That's what I said, didn't I?
Said
Joe, Jim, Ann, and Rose. They were married in Benson Mines. What was the date of their marriage? May 15th, 1904, Mother's father and mother were running a lumber camp at the time, and she went down to her marriage from the lumber camp and then some mines in a boxcar, which was all made up to look festive. And,
All right.
hmm?
It was all light, the floor was all
Yeah,
light.
I say it was made up to look festive. And, after she and Dad were married, they had 8 children. Gerald was the oldest. Then Martin. Then me, Howard. Then Mildred. And they lost a daughter whose name was Mary. And afterward, Kate was born. Then John Mike was born. And finally his second Mary, Mary Frances. I was in the middle of
William Jordan.
William Jordan, who was the youngest child and the last one that they had.
What year were you born?
I was born in 1908, December 26, 1908. Jerry was born in 1905. Marty was born in 1906. I was born in 1908. The rest of them, I don't have their dates right at hand. But after Mother and Dad were married, when we came to Utica, Joe, the oldest son of my father by the first marriage, died. So 11 of us were brought up together. We lived at 1309 Taylor Ave and eventually occupied the whole house. The Mullins lived there till our family got so large that we couldn't live in one floor. And the Mullins moved out sometime in the 20s, and we took over the whole house. The first one of Mother and Dad's children that died was Mildred. She died in 1941 from childbirth. After that, I guess, who was the next one who died?
I think Marty was it.
Yeah, Marty died from cancer of the lungs, smoking camels all his life. Then Kate died. And then Jim died before Mike did. Or he died? No. Yeah, Mike died then.
What year was that?
71.
1971.
Jim died in 72, I guess. All the family were married, and subsequently most of them died, so that right now only Bill and I are surviving with our wives. Jim was a police captain in Utica. Jerry was vice president, sales manager, American France. Mark worked for the telephone company and then for several of the breweries around Utica. Mike ran was steward of the South Utica American Legion Post, and then took over a store on Nida Street, which he ran until he died. Bill is a lawyer still practicing in Utica.
He did at one time run for mayor of Utica.
Yes, he ran for mayor of Utica.
That was what year? What year?
It was right after he started practicing.
Must have been 19. It was after he, I would say it was probably 1950.
It was after Mark was born, I believe.
I think it was in the
It was very young.
about 1950.
You didn't mention yourself.
Well, I was vice president in charge of agency sales at the Utica Mutual, and then I was transferred at the request of Vic Eyre, who was president of the company, to New England, where I was vice president in charge as well of New England operations, 6 New England states. And I retired in 1972 after I had a heart attack, came back home. And so I had been retired for 19 years. I think that's enough of them.
This is information done about research of Thomas Byrnes by my brother, Dr. Joseph Byrnes, and his son, Joseph A. Byrnes, Jr. Grandpa Byrnes, Thomas Byrnes, that is, was born in Caledonia, Livingston County, near Geneseo, New York, August 31st, 1838. Thomas Byrnes, his mother's name was Mary Markay, M-A-R-K-A-Y. His father's name was James Byrnes. About 1866, Thomas settled in Paradise Valley, Nevada, but was driven out by the Bannock and Paiute Indians. He returned to Rome in the fall of 1869 and settled down to raise a family. I note the following achievements. Oh, I missed something. About 1861, I go back, Thomas Byrnes enlisted in the Gansevoort Light Guard for 2 years. His brothers also served in the war, the Civil War. Now we're back again. I noticed the following achievements, says Joey. 1874, he was made a patrolman. 1882, was made police chief. 1883, was appointed to the Fire and Police Board and Water Commissioner. 1882, Thomas and his brothers built the Byrnes Hotel on Railroad Street. Parentheses, Byrnes Alley is still down in that neighborhood, close parentheses. Apparently, he and his brothers owned several parcels of real estate. Several deeds should be traced back 80 years. According to the obituary, Thomas Byrnes was known to be perceptive. He was always eager to learn. He appreciated amusing sides of every story and issue. He was a great storyteller and had a sense of humor. As with most newspapers throughout the country, the Rome Sentinel should have a complete microfilm library of all the back issues of their weekly and daily issues from its founding on July 15, 1852. Issues can be preserved for historical purposes. Then he says that Joey says the paper I looked at the library was falling to pieces. Thomas Byrnes was a prominent and productive citizen for nearly 40 years and had a long and detailed obituary. The Byrnes family in Rome was large between 1850s and 1930s. The end.
Okay, I'll hold it.
I'm about to read the obituary of my grandfather, Henry D. McConnell, who was my mother, Margaret McConnell, Halpin's father. This obituary is taken from the Saturday Evening Globe, which was a weekly publication in Utica for many years and no longer exists. This obituary notice is dated Williamstown, an old-time woodsman. Henry D. McConnell died at his home in Kalura, and this is dated Williamstown underneath that. Henry D. McConnell, one of the best known and one of the old-time woodsmen of central New York, died at his home in Kalura in the Adirondacks Wednesday night after an illness of several months. Mr. McConnell was born in Fredericksville, Canada, 75 years ago. 49 years ago, last February, he was united in marriage with Miss Elizabeth Jordan of that place, and 7 years later moved with his family to Casogue, near Williamstown. At that time, there were large tracts of timber in the region. Mr. McConnell once entered the lumber business on a large scale and filled important contracts for many lumber dealers throughout central New York. A large number of men were employed by him in this work, and for more than a quarter of a century, and thousands of acres of timber were cut under his direction. About 8 years ago, Mr. McConnell moved to Benson Mines near Calora, where his son James McConnell managed the large timber camp of Post and Henderson. Mr. McConnell had general supervision of the camp under his son until about 3 years ago, when advancing age compelled him to retire from active work. His health had not been the best for some time, and it was known by the family that his condition was serious. Mr. McConnell was a man of thorough integrity in his business dealings. During the years he was engaged in the lumber business, he earned for himself the unqualified respect and esteem of the dealers with whom he did business, and of the men who were employed under him. He was more than just and generous to his employees. He had old-time lumbermen's large leaning toward human sympathy and kindness, and there were many woodsmen to remember him for the charity and hospitality that were always given with the free heart and never spoken of afterwards. While he was a resident of this vicinity, he attended St. Patrick's Church in Williamstown and was a generous giver to the funds of the church.
He was one of the first to advocate.
He was one of the first to advocate the building of the present church edifice, and gave freely of his means and his time to secure the completion of the building. His home life was an exceedingly happy one. There was manifest always in the home, as in his hostess, as in his business life, the generosity of a noble nature, frankness, and the hospitality that made him admired and respected in the community, and kept him high in the esteem of all who knew him. Besides his wife, Mr. McConnell is survived by 6 daughters and 3 sons. These were Mrs. Patrick Good of Mary Street, Mrs. Joseph Demarest of 1 Thorn Street, Utica, Mrs. Thomas English of Oswego, Mrs. Margaret Halpin of Harrisville, Mrs. Jeremiah Haley of Williamstown, Mrs. Catherine McDermott of Schenectady, James H. McConnell, Harry McConnell of Calora, and Martin McConnell of this city. In addition, there survives 1 brother, John McConnell of Williamstown, and 3 sisters, Mrs. John Kelly of Williamstown, Mrs. Catherine Curtis of Chicago, and Mrs. Helen Laughlin of Canada. A number of grandchildren survived. The body of the deceased was taken to Williamstown, and the funeral services will be held in St. Patrick's Church at 10 o'clock on Saturday. That's the end of the obituary.
We are describing pictures, photographs, of some of the ONeill family. There's a large picture which is of my grandmother and grandfather, framed in Sheila's dining room. The grandmother and grandfather with their 12 children, 6 boys and 6 girls.
Their names?
Their names?
The names of your grandparents.
Oh, my grandfather was John H. Hogan, John Hogan ONeill. My grandmother was Mary Hayes ONeill. That finishes that?
Uh-huh. Next one.
Now I have a picture of Uncle John ONeill, my mother's brother, the oldest brother. Had 3 children, 2 girls, 2 twin girls, and a boy. And this is a picture of the twin girls. I don't know whether it was when they made their first communion, but they were all dressed in white. But dressing in white was common in those days, but they had beautiful white dresses on.
Okay.
The next picture is a picture of my mother when she was 11 years old and sang at a show, at a recital, at St. Aloysius Columbian Hall, they used to call it. And she sang the song, Nobody's Child. And when she sang that song, my father was probably either present in the audience or he was also taking part in the show, because they had all the young people who were active in the parish doing things. He saw my mother and he said, I'm going to wait for her. And he did. And when she was 19 years old, he married her. Next picture is a picture of mother, my mother, that she had taken with a high neck, very, very high neck, and a black top. She had had a very, what would be the word I want to use? A picture that her mother thought was not really quite modest. It was just a Malene thing across her shoulders, but that's all you could see anyway. And she went home with the proof, and Grandma ONeill said, would you like to have that picture shown in the front of the studio? So she went home. She put on this high neck black dress and went and had her picture taken like that, just to show her mother. So this is that picture. That's all for now.
Byrnes family is next.
Oh, all right. Now I have pictures of the Byrnes family. I mean by the Byrnes family, the sons and daughters of John Charles Byrnes. And in my hand, I have a picture of John Charles Byrnes when he was a youngster, about probably 8 to 10 years old. And on the back of that picture is written, Captain of the Little Giants of East Rome. I would assume that the Little Giants may have been a baseball team. Now I have in my hand a picture of my father's godmother, whose name was Catherine McGrath. She and her husband owned some kind of a hotel in Atlantic City in 1905 when my mother and father were married, and they went there on their honeymoon. She's the lady who gave the beautiful Stations of the Cross to St. Peter's Church in Rome. Here's a picture of me. And I can remember having a hard time getting my foot out from under me on this picture. And I was probably 4 years old, 3 or 4 years old when that was taken.
That would be 1915?
Probably 1915. See, it had to be before my father died. And he died in 1916. And here's a picture of me when I was 21.
Is that before or after you were married? Before you were married?
Before we were married.
Before you were married.
Yeah. And I have before me several little snapshots. One is a Joe, Mary, and Jack. Another one is, I think it's Sister Victor and me. She was a holy name nun. Yes, it says that on top. And a picture of my brother Joe, all dressed up in a classy suit with knickers. And another picture, that was taken in 1915, I guess. And then there's a little picture of him down in the corner, taken in 1922. And here's a picture of Mary, all dressed up with her beautiful curls and her lovely hair ribbon and her patent leather shoes. She's a darling little girl.
Mary is your...
My sister, Mary.
older sister. She was born in...
She was born in 1907.
1907.
December the 9th. And I suppose at this time she was 8 years old, maybe. It's been... Now, here's a picture of Jack.
So the next picture is Stanley.
Well, I think the Jack on
Okay.
of Jack, John Francis Byrnes, in his uniform, World War II. He was in the Army. Next is a picture of Aunt Mary and Uncle Stanley in their living room in Dunedin, Florida. Very, very nice. And here's a photograph of Uncle Stanley. It's a copy of a photograph, I'm sure. Very handsome young man, evidently, when he first got his law degree, I assume. This picture.
And that's it for the immediate Byrnes family, correct?
Yeah, I think so.
This is a picture of John J. Halpin, who was my father. He was born in Ireland and lived in this country in Utica for a number of years. He died when he was 52 years old. He left 11 children at that time. The second picture is of my mother, Margaret McConnell Halpin, who lived to be 71 years of age. She was a fine woman, and after my father died, she took care of the whole family. That is, the children who were left at home, who were unmarried. There were, I think, Gerald and Ann and Rose were already married. Jim hadn't married yet. Martin was married. But we managed to survive. And Mother I don't know what more to say about her. She was a wonderful woman, well loved by all the family.
And was particularly close to their mother.
To Sheila, yes, she thought the world of Sheila, and Sheila thought the world of her. In fact, when Katie and I were first married, we lived downstairs in my mother's house, and so Sheila was well acquainted with all the family. The second picture is the picture of the 4 Halpin boys, Gerald, Howard, John, and Bill.
Describe them from right to left on the picture.
Well, Bill was the first on the picture, starting at the left, and next to him was Gerald, and following that was Michael, and then me, Howard. And the other side, starting on the left, was John Cahalan, who was my nephew, Leo McCarthy, who was brother-in-law, Mary's husband, George Schiffer, who was another brother-in-law, was Ann's husband, Luke Cahalan, who was also a brother-in-law, was Rose's husband, and Bing McGowan was a brother-in-law. He was Kate's husband. All the men and women were in attendance at Bill's wedding. When was he married?
Oh dear, here.
He must have been married in about 1941. He must have been married in about 1951 or 52, 53. I don't know.
I can't remember.
He was probably married in...
Tell us where you got that wonderful silk suit.
Oh, the silk suit that I had on was from Wicks and Greenman's. It was Italian silk and was the pride of my life. And also Katie's life. She enjoyed it very much. Everywhere I went, someone wanted to know where I bought it and how much I paid for it, which I never told them how much I paid for it.
How much did you pay for it?
It's been a lot of money in those days, but not much in these days.
Probably
Yeah.
$75 or $100, which was plenty of money in those days. The next picture is of all the sisters, sister-in-laws,
The big sister.
niece, and
Cousin. Gert.
Gert Halpin was also in
Describe them from center to center.
the
The bride is in the middle.
Mary Ann is in the middle. On her right, or on her left, is Rose Cahalan Halpin, or Rose Halpin Cahalan, and Ann Schiffer Cahalan is next to Rose.
Huh?
Ann Schiffer, Ann Halpin Schiffer. And Bill's wife's right is Helen Sikoski Halpin, and your mother, Sheila Halpin, Katie and my daughter.
The first 3 that you mentioned, how are they related to you?
Sisters.
Sisters.
No, well, the first 2 I mentioned were
Sisters.
my sisters and Helen Sikoski and Mike Halpin's wife, and your mother is not married at that time. In the top row from left to right was Mary Rose Cahalan, who's a niece of mine, Katharine Halpin, my wife, Peg Halpin, Jerry's wife. What was John's wife's name? John Cahalan. Elaine Cahalan, John Cahalan's wife. Kate McGowan, who was my sister. Mary Halpin McCarthy, also my sister. And Gertrude Halpin. I don't think she was married at that time, was she?
Yes, she was.
Gertrude Halpin Stemson, who was a cousin.
Who's still alive?
Yeah, we were all at Bill's
91 years old.
wedding and had a wonderful time.
Where was that at? Where was that held?
Harts Hill Inn.
Is that where it was?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
In-
I had a wedding breakfast at Hart's Hill Inn.
In Utica?
And Whitesboro.
Whitesboro, New York.
The next picture is of my...
Excuse me a minute. The wedding was at Our Lady of Lourdes.
In
in
Utica.
And then we went to Hart's Hill Inn for a wedding dinner and a few cocktails. Next picture is of my sister, Mildred Halpin Loftus. She died before Bill's wedding, which is the reason that she was not at the wedding. I don't know, was Eddie Loftus was invited. Was he there?
No, he had remarried by then.
Yeah. And not present at the wedding were my older brother, Jim Halpin, and his wife, Ann. For what reason, I don't know at this time. Nor was Martin Halpin. What? And his wife, Ann, were not at the wedding. And I don't know why they weren't. But that was a complete
I'm
group.
sure they were invited.
Yeah, complete group of the family in those two pictures at that time in 1953 or whenever Bill was married.
What do you think I was married?
Mark was married for 2 or 3 years before they had Mark, weren't they?
No, not married that much.
Oh.
Mark is 34, isn't he?
I don't know.
He's 34 or 35.
Mark Bill's
So say it was 35 years ago, so it was 1956.
1955 or 6. That's what I was going to say. Okay, next set of pictures will be the next generation.
Yes. The Moceyunas kids. I have in front of me 2 framed pictures of Sheila. One when she was about 10 months old, and the other one she was about 3 years old. And she was a pretty cute little baby, I'll tell you that. Then we have another one of Sheila at age 2 years and 7 months.
What year was she born?
She was born in January of 1936. And she was a happy little doll. Oh, here's another one. Only, let's see, 1 year and 10 months. 1 year and 10 months on that one. Now we have a picture of Sheila. It's a picture from the Observer Dispatch, and it's the announcement of her engagement to Mr. Albert John Moceyunas, son of Mrs. Peter Moceyunas of Pittston, Pennsylvania. And it's a very nice picture of Sheila.
Beautiful girl.
Yeah. Then we have a picture here of Katharine and Sheila and Bobby Byrnes when Bobby was about maybe 2 years old, and the girls were young, early teen, maybe 12 years old. It's a very cute picture. Now we have the wedding pictures of Sheila and Albert. They got in the car and they smushed immediately. Then we have a picture of Al, Sheila, and Katharine at the reception, I'm sure.
That picture in the car?
Well, it was outside of the church.
That was in Aunt Mary's? Aunt Mary Miller's Mercedes.
I guess it was.
Yes, it was.
And then a picture of Al and Sheila coming down the steps of the church, and Uncle Stanley right in back of them. And now we're on an early on picture, 1952, Christmas. Sheila all dressed up to go to I would suppose, a dance, high school dance. Here's a little picture of Al and Sheila. And I suppose, as John says, it was before they were married, and they looked pretty happy.
Very happy.
And here's a picture of Al with his 3, are they cousins, John, or uncles? Do you know?
Well, one is of his brother.
Brothers.
Oh yes, his
Beat him.
brother's standing beside him.
And then his
And
cousin Fritz, gentleman with the shorter hair, that would be all the way to the left, I think. I'm looking at the picture right now on the video. I can see it from here. Turn it around for me and I'll look at it. Right to the left is his cousin Fritz. That's all the way to the left. To his immediate right, but on this picture to the immediate left is Uncle Vito, his brother.
Mm-hmm.
And the last person, I don't know who the last guy is.
Some relative.
Yeah, I don't know who that is.
And here's Sheila's wedding photograph. It's very beautiful, I think.
She had on the lace from
Belgium, I think.
you know.
She also carried my mother's her book that she carried at her wedding. Her mother did.
Where were they married?
Who?
St. Francis de Sales Church in Utica.
In Utica. And their reception was at?
Arts Hill.
Same as Uncle Bill?
Yes.
Arts Hill in Whitesboro.
And we have a picture of the father of the bride taking his daughter down the aisle.
Oh, Papa.
Yes.
Oh,
Papa.
yeah.
Papa giving his daughter away. And we have a picture of Al and Sheila cutting the cake. And then we have a picture of them after they were married. I think they were at somebody's party, and they were holding hands as usual and smiling at each other. And here's a picture of Al. We're now looking at some of our little precious dolls pictures from birth up to, school pictures. They are so cute. Annie was the first. Tell about Annie, huh?
Well, Annie was quite a thrill because she was the first grandchild. And she was, what did you say?
I was going to say we were pretty upset when she had to go to Trinidad.
And when she went to Trinidad, she was pretty well acquainted with us. But Grandma and I went to visit them, Al and Sheila in Trinidad, and Ann was about a year old, and she didn't know us when we got off the plane. She wouldn't come near us.
What year was that?
Well, that was in
That was the year that Peter was born, 1961. March 1961.
And it was so hot in the airport in Trinidad that we stopped to have a beer. And she kept looking over Grandma and me and looking at us, and pretty soon she decided she'd come over and sit in my lap. And after that, everything was fine.
She just stared at him.
Gave me their father's look, you know.
Oh, your father can stare. That's the way she did.
When we were in Trinidad, of course, we went down because Peter was to be born. And so I was squeezing that he'd be born on April 17th, which was St. Patty's Day. March 17th, which is St. Patty's Day, and he was born the day
16.
before, on the March 16th. We enjoyed Trinidad a great deal with the two children. We came home 2 weeks after he was born.
Papa kept saying, this is going to be a black-haired, black-eyed boy. And he kept that up, and wasn't even born, he had the mop of black hair. And he was a little boy.
And then he got, his hair got lighter. When he came home, his hair was much lighter, and then afterward it turned black again.
Oh dear. We had such great fun with those children.
And
It was a happy, happy time.
Elizabeth was
born in Syracuse.
That's
and
right.
when Elizabeth was born in Syracuse, you and Ann came down and stayed with us.
Peter and Ann.
Peter and Ann, came down and stayed with us. And Grandma Moceyunas was up at your house. Came up to your house when it was time for your mother to come home from the hospital. And she and your dad came down to pick Peter and Ann up. And I'm telling you, I had milk, little, nursing bottles. Every place I turned, they were under the cribs, under the beds. What a mess I had. Trying to keep them both happy. Getting them dressed to go out in the snow. I'd get the snowsuits on, and I'd start to put one on, the other one would scream. So I had to hurry, get them all dressed, put them on the sled, and they'd cry to go back in the house. It's too cold out. Oh, we had fun. Now, John, when you were born.
What about Elizabeth?
I started, Elizabeth was born at that time, and then Grandma Moceyunas was up at the house before you were born. I mean, I'm talking about Peter and Ann went home, and Elizabeth was born, had been born, she was home, and Grandma Moceyunas stayed with you with them for a week or so. So then, when you were born, in April, it was the hottest April I ever knew. I had shorts on, and it was around my bare feet out to the yards, and it was so warm. You were born the 25th of April. I'll never forget that.
And Al didn't like the winter too much, but he said that such weather as this is so unusual. And Johnny was, boy, you were, I don't know how to describe you. You didn't look much like the other kids, but you were kind of husky and you had big hands. And soon learned to keep all the family laughing. You were the jokester. Still are to this day when you get together with them, I guess. Telling them stories.
The four of you would sit around the table in the kitchen, and you'd be performing, and they would laugh and laugh. You never saw such happiness. You really got along beautifully. There wasn't a jealous bone in anybody's body.
Of course, when was it when John came that Elizabeth, what did Ann say? Take that baby. Was it John or?
John, after John came. Ann came down the stairs one night. Your mother's told you this. Take that baby back to St. Mary's. I'm sick and tired of babies. Such a remark as that. And your mother and father got laughing so couldn't believe it. Can't you just see her marching down, making the announcement? Oh dear.
That's the reason we think that so far no great-grandchildren have come forth. I'll just add that as an aside.
We're going to hang in there, to tell you the truth. We're going to hang in there.
You'll probably hang in there longer than the old man.
Oh, good night.
And you moved to Massachusetts in, what year was that,
68.
1968. Tell us about the trips.
Oh, back and forth.
Back and forth to Boston.
Back and forth. It was always a meeting.
Well, when we used to come to visit.
Oh, yes.
That was the longest trip we ever took.
Remember the time the skunk was around and I closed all the doors and windows and it was so hot?
Tell us about that house and your neighbors there.
Oh, we have pictures of that house around someplace.
I'll cut to those.
Mm-hmm.
I'll cut to a picture of the house, but
It was a beautiful house.
It was really a very beautiful,
3
well laid
bedrooms,
out
2
house.
baths, and a beautiful living room and dining room.
where was
Yeah.
it located?
And,
Highland Ave and
Winchester, Massachusetts.
Which is right outside of Boston, right?
Yeah, sort of a bedroom town.
no industry in the town.
Yeah. And we still are very friendly with Mrs. Condon. And they were so kind to us when we first moved in. They came right down and welcomed us. And they brought a great big strawberry covered angel food cake with whipped cream. And it so happened it was Uncle Stanley's birthday, so we used that for a birthday. cake. But anyway, all the time we were down there, they were wonderfully generous, kind friends to us. And in fact, it was through their efforts that we were able to join the Winchester Country Club, which is quite an exclusive place. And so.
And also, Jidge, like my whiskey sours.
Yes.
We invited Jidge, who was Jidge Connors and Kay Connors' husband, invited him over for dinner one night. And Jidge arrived about 10 minutes early, and I said, "Where's Kay?" Oh, he says, "Hosper." He always called her Hosper. Hosper is diddling around, and I couldn't wait for one of these drinks. So he said, right. Then we also made good friends with the Palouse, who were next door neighbors to the Connors. And on the other side, Dr. Flaherty, who was a wonderful man, had a wife who's been quite sick. And Dr. Flaherty had 3 girls, 3 daughters. And
do you remember them?
His wife got quite sick. He took care of her, and somehow he stuck himself with a needle or something, didn't he?
And he got an abscess on his leg.
He died. He just died a couple of years ago. He's a wonderful man.
And his wife
Tom
is
Flaherty.
still around with multiple sclerosis. Saying the kids are all the girls are all graduating in college. And I understand there's just one of them, I think it's Susan, who's home with her mother. I don't know whether the other 2 girls are.
From there, you moved back to Utica, and what year was that?
In 72.
1972.
1972.
February 1st.
I remember the large retirement party.
Yeah, we have
Oh, that's right. You came to
pictures on the
Sure
dresser
do.
in there.
Mm-hmm.
You and John with Uncle Stanley.
Right.
We with Peter with Uncle Stan.
You and Peter. I'm getting a little mixed up, John.
And I also remember we were going to Massachusetts, and I think we took Peter with us.
Yes, we did.
And he would, every time we went by a mile marker on the road, he'd say, "Well, only 101 miles now, and only 100 miles, or there's another mile gone by." It seemed that we never were going to get there. And also we remember when you were there, Jen, and you were young, and you were puffing around the house. Do you remember running around the house? Puffing. Said, "What are you doing, Jan?" "Well, I was trying." "Who was he trying to beat, Kate?"
His friend across the street. Buzzy.
Buzzy, yeah. Trying to beat Buzzy. We had them all down at once, didn't we?
They were out, yes, they were all, Alan, Sheila, and the kids. They were there.
Well, it seems
that was that summer when the skunks were around.
Yeah, but wasn't John there with Peter? No, didn't he come along one time?
Uh-huh. For 1 week he
Yeah.
came. Right.
And Elizabeth and Ann came down too for.
Yes.
Were you there when they put on the show out in the yard?
No.
Oh, I guess Elizabeth and Ann were there.
But you know, Johnny used to be a good boy. He'd take the shovel and clean out the backyard.
Oh,
Lady.
Didn't say anything about your dog Lady.
That's what I'm saying.
We've got a couple pictures of her.
Yes. I've got a big picture of her there. She was supposed to be the watchdog, John.
She could bark.
Smooth-haired fox terrier. And she would bark if she heard any sounds around it. So, it was helpful.
Yeah. You kids all loved her. She was a nice little dog. Not as nice as your dog Amber, I suppose, but still very nice.
So, after Massachusetts you moved, we started on that before.
Oh.
Back in
Yes.
1972.
We bought a house on Oneida Street. And a couple of winters, in one winter, you and Peter came down and shoveled the roof off for us. Do you remember that?
Yep.
And put a great big snowman on top. And because Papa was afraid the roof would cave in with all that snow while we were gone south. Well, we went, that was in 1973 we went south.
Right.
Yeah, we didn't go south in 72.
No, 73 went down with Jerry and Peg. and spent the winter
Where?
at Deerfield Beach.
Deerfield Beach.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first year that we met the Milbrants, right?
I don't know.
I want you to spend a couple minutes and tell us who the Milbrants are and where you met them and.
Well, Papa can tell you.
Well, Dave Milbrandt was an excellent agent for the Utica Mutual Insurance Company, and I met him because of my business connection with the Utica Mutual, and became very friendly with him and with his wife Marie. So we visited there very often, and Marie and Gay were here one night and met Ann. We took Ann out to dinner with us. She happened to be down visiting us. She was only a little girl. She charmed Marie with her story about someone going down the hole in the bathtub. She was so skinny. What was the girl's name?
Alice, where art thou going?
Do you remember Alice, Where Art Thou Going, Peter or John? Well, she sang it for Marie, and Marie thought she was delightful. So after that, she invited the Moceyunas family down there, and you and the rest of the kids were down there several times. Once, who wasn't there? Elizabeth, the last time Elizabeth was working in New York City or going to school, she was there. And Peter and John, I don't know whether Ann was there or not. But anyway, we visited the Milbrants several times. You kids got along very well with them. You sang songs. You sang that song.
Bad, bad, Leroy Brown.
The four of you sang the song. You wouldn't sing after that very much.
He did sing that one. He's the one, they have the tape. They have a tape?
Yeah, but after that he...
Oh.
And then they also sang about the farmer. What was that story about? Anyway.
He took unto his...
And they yeah.
I don't know. I can't remember.
It was one of Ann's songs that but the four of you sang anyway. They still have a tape of it, you know. You're aware of that. I guess you heard it when you were down the last time, didn't you?
I don't think so.
How long since you've done it? Milbrants?
Well, he was down in Milbrants with us about 3 years ago, I believe.
Oh, well, that's right. You went down alone with us.
Right.
Yeah.
Where's that located? Where is the farm located?
Well, really, the address is Tivoli, New York, but they consider they're part of Red Hook because it's just down the road. I mean, they go to church there, they do their grocery shopping and everything else in Red Hook. But the mailing address is Tivoli.
Which is south of Albany.
Yes. Close, in the vicinity of Catskill, New York.
It's about 25 miles south of Catskill. Over the Catskill Bridge and down. They have no dogs anymore. Well, you know that. There was no dogs.
Right.
They had no dogs when you were there. But they've got a fellow who lives he lives above the garage. He has the apartment there, and he's kind of a caretaker when they go away. So he has a new, not a golden retriever. And Marie is crazy about him, and the dog comes over to visit her and doesn't want to go back to his own home, which is right on the premises.
This man they have is retired from the electric company. I don't know what it's called.
Central Hudson, Gas and Electric.
And he's not old, but he's in his 60s, I suppose. Does he have?
Yes, he has a family.
In his 60s. And and he's very handy, and he's nobody asks him to do things, and he's doing them. You know, he can see what has to be done, and he's very helpful. And they get along fine. So he got the dog, and he's taking care of the dog. But it is a good thing to have a dog on that farm.
So from Oneida Street, you moved to
Chestnut Hills.
Which is pretty close to where we're at right now in New Hartford.
Yes.
That was probably about 19
It was 1976.
76.
We were there till we'll be here 3 years, 87. We'll be here 3 years in December.
88 we moved.
Well, we moved it the 15th of December.
88.
Oh, 88?
Sure, we only been here 3 years. in
Okay,
December.
all right, dear. I was, all right.
That was a
We
apartment
saw-
that went to condominium, right?
Yes. And there are a lot of stairs from the top floor to the laundry, and I thought as time was going on, the stairs were going to be too much for me and for Papa. So we had an opportunity to sell it and make some money, so we did. So
Now, in that length of time from 1976, a lot has happened.
what's that?
All four of us graduated from high school, college. Papa, you remember Ann's party in Buffalo?
Oh, yes. A wonderful party. And we took Peter to Northeastern when he went to school. Introduced him to Joe Youngs and his wife, and to Kay Connor. He used to go and visit Kay Connor and fix her television if anything was wrong with it. And we did go to the party in Buffalo when Ann graduated. You were there too, John, weren't you?
It was the weekend that Grandma Moceyunas died.
Yes, it was.
Oh, that's right. That's right, yeah.
That would have been 1983? Or 1984? 1983.
84 maybe.
84, that was...
Because Papa had been ill and he really wasn't in great shape when he went to Ann's graduation.
It was around the 15th or 16th of May or the 20th of May 1984.
I would kind of think so.
You drove us home from Buffalo that
Right.
night, didn't you?
Right. And then we got in the car the next morning and drove to Scranton.
Yeah, that's right.
And then in what year did you move back to over to this apartment?
88.
88.
Mm-hmm.
For the last couple of years you've been going to St. Simon's Island and...
We went to St. Simon's Island in 87? It's 87.
We missed the next year, and then we went in 89. Then we went to, began December 26, 1908, when I was born in Harrisville, New York. And before I was a year old, the family moved to Utica, New York, where we lived at 1309 Taylor Ave for many years. I went to kindergarten at Roosevelt School, which was number 20 in those days. And when I started in grade school, I went to St. Francis and graduated from there at age 12. Thereafter, I matriculated at Utica Free Academy in 1921 and graduated in 1925. While there, I played a little baseball and pitched for the 1925 team. I was too young and too small to play football, so I never played football in high school. After I graduated from high school in 1925, I went to work for Hathaway's Bakery in the office because one of their chief assistants in the office had quit and gone out to sell bread on a bread wagon where he could make more money. I stayed there through June, July, and August when George Knapp, my predecessor, got a hernia on a bread wagon, couldn't work there any longer, so Hathaway's, it was Betcher's Bakery in those days, decided to hire him back, and they told me that my work was all right, but that they could hire George back and that I would have to leave. Consequently, I left and didn't work for about 3 months. Finally, one of my friends was working for the Utica Mutual Insurance Company, and he suggested I go down and see his boss, a man by the name of Jack Hughes, who was claims superintendent. And Jack Hughes, I went in to see Jack Hughes, and I was all dressed up in my blue coat and good hat. And he said, "You don't want this kind of a job." And I said, "I'll take any kind of a job." So he hired me. First place I worked was down in the vault in the cellar of the Mayrow building where the Utica Mutual was located. And it was dirty, and oh, the work was terrible. But I would get $11 a week, so I decided to keep the job. And I worked there for, I guess 3 months. Finally, I had an opportunity to work for Ray White, who set up workers' compensation and other reserves. But a little story about that vault down cellar. The first day we got paid, I'd been there a week and we got paid, and I got the $11, no Social Security or retirement or anything else out of it. And several of the young fellows decided to start a crap game, so I got in a crap game down cellar and lost the whole $11. I had to tell my mother that they withheld the first week's pay and I didn't get anything, and I wouldn't get paid till I'd been there 2 weeks. So she accepted that. Next week I got paid, and they had a crap game again, so I tried my luck again and won the $11 or $12 back, whatever I'd lost. And so I was able to pay my mother for 2 weeks' board. But after a while, we moved down in the first bank building on Genesee Street. Ray White was promoted to compensation claims examiner, and I got his job of setting up reserves. I was then 17 years old, but he knew what he was doing, and I had him for counsel. I'd ask him questions, and if I found a case that I didn't know how much we should set up, when I say set up reserves, we had to set that up as a liability against our assets. And anyway, I worked there for quite a while. Finally, I had an opportunity to go in the underwriting department, which I took. I was studying to be an actuary, and that didn't work out too well because I decided to go to college, and I went to college for a couple of weeks. And mother couldn't get along without me, so I came back home. And then I went to work in the underwriting department, worked there for several years. In 1935, Charlie Gilmore was made superintendent of agencies, and he wanted me to come in as his assistant, which I did. I stayed there for 25 years as assistant superintendent of agencies. When I finally was made superintendent of agencies and then made vice president in 1965, I guess. But during the time I was in the agency department, Charlie Gilmore was a great salesman and supervised the appointment of all agents. In fact, originally he appointed many of the agents that we had. And I did all the office work and helped agents who had problems. And worked in all departments so that I knew claims and underwriting and accounting and statistical and payroll audit. Finally, and we had some great times. We used to have a convention in Syracuse every year. Yeah. attended all the state conventions in Syracuse and most of the national conventions. We had some great times at the national conventions. I recall that we were in New York City at the Hotel New Yorker for a national convention, and Ernie Ulrich, who was our vice president of Atlanta, came, and Whitey Campbell came from Richmond, and Charlie Gilmore and I were there. So I don't know where it started, but a dice game ensued, and quite a few people got in, including some big agents of ours from Richmond, Atlanta, and all over. And it was quite a noisy game. The door was open, and I went down to the lobby to get something, and when I came back I could hear them. You know, even though the door was, I don't know whether it was open or closed, but the people in the surrounding rooms were getting a little bit irked about it. So I said, "You fellas better shut up, or we're going to have the house detectives up here before." "Ah, forget about it." So the game went on for about 10 minutes more, and suddenly there's a knock at the door. Or maybe the door was open, but the two house detectives came in, and one of them knocked at the door before he came in. So he thought it was a floating crap game, which they had a lot of them in New York in those days. And he decided that he was going to arrest all of us. So he stood at the door, and Ernie Ulrich was there. He was a big Dutchman. He said, "Who are they, help?" I said, "A couple of cops are going to arrest all of us." "Don't dare," he said. He sat down in the chair. He said, "Don't cross that threshold. I'll sue this hotel for all the money you've got." So anyway, they told him, "You shut up or we'll arrest you. Don't cross that threshold. This man's room is his castle." So anyway, we talked him out of it and stopped the crap game. And later on, Charlie Gilmore had a couple of drinks, and he went over and started giving the desk clerk hell about it. And I had to calm that one down too. But we had some wonderful times. A lot of food, a lot of drink. When Vic Air came, he decided that he was trying to get rid of all the old-timers in Utica. At least that was my conception of it. And he offered me a job of running the New England office. And I told him I wasn't interested in it. And he made me a financial offer, which I couldn't refuse. And so I came home and talked to Grandma about it. And she didn't care much about moving, but I told her about the financial incentive, and she decided that perhaps we'd better go, which was our reason for leaving Utica and going to New England. In New England, we had a very nice life. The office was easy to run. I mean, it was simple for me after having, with all the experience I had. So we stayed there and made many nice friends. Until I had the heart attack, and then I decided that I better come back to Utica. And so I called Vic Air and told him that I wanted to go back to Utica. I had the heart attack. I was ready to retire. So he came over and offered me the regular retirement with an additional stipend of so much a month. And we took it and returned to Utica. While I was in Utica, I played I was working for the Utica Mutual, but I had gotten a little bigger, and I played quite a bit of semi-pro football here, different teams. In fact, I got a picture of a football team there someplace. Every one of them, except me, is dead. This baseball picture I have. Everyone except Jim Gerling and I, and the Utica Mutual team, everyone is dead. So, had a lot of fun. played some athletics. Here I am at 82, not much good. That's kind of a brief synopsis.
You'd like to know about my early life, Johnny, and I'll start at age 5 years old when Mary and I went to the Academy of Holy Names. That was in fall of 1917. Our dad had died in May 5th, 1916, and my mother died May 5th, 1917. June 5th, 1917. I'm trying to think now. We went to the convent in September 1916, I believe, because Mother was alive the first year we were there, but she was ill and up at Saranac Lake for part of the time. And then she came home sometime during the winter of 1917, and she died on June 5th. Meantime, Mary and I were at the convent, the Academy of Holy Names, and Joe and Jack were with Grandma ONeill. And that's the way it went. Mary and I continued to go to school, at boarding school, Academy of Holy Names. Mary, when I was in the 8th grade, Mary graduated from high school. And my first year of high school, we went to the Academy of Holy Names in Albany, and Mary took some more music. They had a very good music department down there, and she took some more music lessons, piano. Then she took a civil service exam, and that summer, that would be 1925, she graduated from high school. And then she was a year at the convent, so the summer of 1926, I believe, she took the civil service exam, and she immediately got herself a job at the State Highway Department in Utica. And I don't think the lists were very long then, and also somebody from Rome was a kind of a boss in that area, and saw her name on the list, and she got the job. So then I continued to go to the Academy of Holy Names in Rome after 1 year in Albany, and graduated in 1929. And I was a day student at that time and lived with my grandmother, because at that time both Jack was home for part of the time, but my brother Joe was in college, and of course you know he went to first of all he went to RPI for 1 year, and he decided he didn't want to be an engineer, and then he went to Pennsylvania, to Easton, Pennsylvania. I can't remember the name of the school, but anyway, he went to school there.
Lafayette.
Went there for 2 years, and then he decided he would go to the University of Grenoble in France. So he finished his 4 years of college at the University of Grenoble in France. Then he came home. Meantime, he would work in the summertime. He came home, and he decided to go to medical school. So my Uncle Tim's wife, had a cousin who was a Jesuit, and with his help, Joe got into Georgetown Medical School, because it isn't always easy to get into medical school, as you've always probably heard. So then he graduated from medical school 4 years later, and he married Aunt Mary. Her name was Mary McDade, who was a nurse, and he met her when he was at school. So that takes care of that. And when I finished high school, I went to Excelsior School of Business in Utica, and we all had an apartment. We all were together then in an apartment in Utica. Except, of course, the boys would go back to school. Meantime, Jack was going to prep school in Boston, in Danvers, Massachusetts, St. John's Prep School. So he had a year or two more to go there. And then I had several jobs. Now that's where the Depression was starting. In '31, it was pretty hard to get a job anyplace. And so I worked in Kemp's music store. Oh, I took dictation and things like that. And I was there for maybe a year and a half. And business got pretty bad in the music store. So, not that I was highly paid, I was getting $12 a week for 60 hours a week. And 5 days a week. No, 40 hours. No, 6 days a week for 8 hours a day. So that's 48. So, then, where did I go? I went to work for Miller and Roberts, which is an automobiles electric supply store. I worked in the office there, and meantime, I had met your grandfather, and we were married in 1935, and Sheila was born in 1936, and we were very, very happy to have her. We welcomed her with open arms, but I had never been around very many babies, so I was scared to death. If she burped, I was scared. But by the time you kids came along, I was used to it.
I hope.
So, then we've had a happy marriage. We've had a very happy marriage. Sheila was always such a darling girl. And then she married your darling father. And then we had the adorable grandchildren. And now we're easing off. The time is, I can't say that my time is short. I have Aunt Anna, who is 99 years old, still around. She's the last one of my mother's family, and she's still around. Sister Mary Rosalina ONeill, she goes by now. So, I guess I said it all, hadn't I?
I think so.
Over the years.